What's going on, everybody? It's Tormel's Urban Report. Today is November 2nd, 2019, and it's the anniversary of the great escape of ASSATA SHAKUR, where she escaped out of a New Jersey prison, 1979, and made her way ultimately to Cuba. And what we're doing is honoring the courage and the tenacity of this young lady, and we appreciate, her steadfast and commitment to Black liberation. So I just want to give you an example of who she is from my perspective, and she is one of my heroes, and she will remain one of my heroes, and I'm proud to say that. So every November 2nd will be acknowledged as National ASSATA SHAKUR Day. All right? So let me give you a little example of the amazing person that she is.
The addition of Joanne Chesimard to the FBI's most wanted terrorist list.
The first woman to be added to the list. Chesimard, a convicted killer and former Black Liberation Army member, is still being hunted. She was serving a life prison sentence for killing a state trooper in a shootout in 1973, but escaped from a correctional facility in New Jersey and fled to Cuba.
Today, on the 40th anniversary of Trooper Forrester's brutal murder, I am pleased and honored to announce the doubling of the reward for the capture of longtime fugitive Joanne Chesimard.
During her trial and imprisonment, many argued she had been a victim of racism and mistreatment. Officials say Chesimard, also known as ASSATA SHAKUR, is not considered a threat, but is still a domestic terrorist.
While living openly and freely in Cuba, she continues to maintain and promote her terrorist ideology. No person, no matter what his or her political or moral convictions are, is above the law.
The FBI hopes the increased reward will help bring her back to the US to serve out her remaining sentence.
Today is the 42nd anniversary of the murder of a New Jersey state trooper, a crime for which she was convicted. In a new Fox doc, Dan Bowens heads to Cuba, where Chesimard has been living freely for decades.
My arms were in the air in a split second. They shot me.
She's a convicted domestic terrorist who executed a state trooper.
Joanne Chesimard committed a crime. She was convicted. It's time to bring her back.
She has lived in Cuba for nearly 30 years, hiding in plain sight, even lecturing at a local university, under the direct protection of the federal government, a blessing from Fidel Castro. She's known here as ASSATA SHAKUR, but in the United States, law enforcement refers to her as Joanne Chesimard, her original name. She's convicted of killing a New Jersey state trooper back in the 1970s, later escaping prison and hiding out here in Cuba. Now, as the two nations, the U.S. and this island nation, attempt to repair old wounds, her case and her fate is back front and center.
You have heard in her own words, this woman was a political activist. She was targeted by whom? J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI in a program that was called COINTELPRO. That program was unveiled by whom? Frank Church, Senator Frank Church, in the 1970s. He chaired the Senate Intelligence Committee. That committee determined that the FBI was using both legal but mostly illegal methods to do what? In the FBI's own words, they wanted to discredit, to stop the rise of a black messiah. Now, the FBI carried out a campaign where targeting not only the Black Panther Party. They targeted SCLC, they targeted Martin Luther King, they targeted Harry Belafonte, they targeted Eartha Kitt, they targeted anyone who supported the struggle for civil rights that they considered to be dangerous. It is in that context we need to look at what happened on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973. What they call Joanne Chesimard, what we know as ASSATA SHAKUR, she was targeted by the FBI, stopped, and the allegation that she was a cold-blooded killer is not supported by any of the forensic evidence. If we look at the trial, we'll find that she was victimized. She was shot. She was shot in the back. The bullet exited and broke the clavicle in her shoulder. She could not raise a gun. She could not raise her hand to shoot. And she was shot while her hands were in the air. Now, that is the forensic evidence. There is not one scintilla of evidence placing a gun in her hand. No arsenic residue was found on her clothing or on her hands. So the allegation by the state police that she took an officer's gun and shot him, executed him in cold blood, is not only false, but it is designed to inflame. Superintendent of State Police claimed that ASSATA SHAKUR took the officer Foster's weapon and shot him while he was on the ground. There is not one scintilla of evidence at the trial attesting to that.
I'm an African woman who believes in freedom and justice, social justice, political justice, economic justice for all people. I believe in that oppressed people, wherever they are, have the right to self-determination. I believe that socialism is an integral part of building social justice on this planet. I believe that the priorities of this planet have to be completely changed. And instead of profits, instead of policies that destroy the earth, that destroy the water, that destroy human beings, I believe a policy that protects people, that makes people live in a community, a world community. That's what I believe. That's my basic political commitment at this moment. What brought me to that conclusion was, in the process of struggling, I've also understood that part of struggling is learning, is studying. And my own experiences in the 60s led me to understand that it wasn't just enough to ask for a piece of the pie. That the whole liberation of oppressed people in the United States had to do not with climbing up some ladder to success, not for asking to be just like Rockefeller or just like DuPont or just like Ford, because that would only continue the oppression and exploitation of oppressed people in the United States, and specifically African people born and raised in the United States. So that I began to understand that more and more the condition of my people, my history, was very much connected with other oppressed people, and I began to see that the same foot that was on the necks of the Vietnamese people, that was on the necks of all oppressed people on the planet, was the same foot that was on my neck. And so I began to understand that imperialism has to go. It is a poison that is killing people all over this world.
They arrested on charges of conspiracy 21 of our most effective activists, of our most effective leaders. As a movement, have to concentrate a lot of our energies on trying to liberate our imprisoned comrades. Even though they were given bail, the bail was $100,000 apiece, and only a few of them we were able to bail out. I think that we cannot look at the Black Panther Party in the past. We cannot look at the Black liberation movement as something in the past. African people are still not free, and there are still many, many political prisoners in the United States. It is time for us to demand total, immediate amnesty for all political prisoners and prisoners of war. If we do not take ourselves seriously, if we do not take our movement seriously, then we will have to hang our heads in front of our ancestors.
I must confess that it had never occurred to me before to write you, and I find myself overwhelmed and moved to have this opportunity. Although circumstances have compelled me to reach out to you, I am glad to have this occasion to try and cross the boundaries that would otherwise tend to separate us. I understand that the New Jersey State Police have written to you and asked you to intervene and to help facilitate my extradition back to the United States. I believe that their request is unprecedented in history, since they have refused to make their letter to you public, although they have not hesitated to publicize their request. I am completely uninformed as to the accusations they are making against me. Why, I wonder, do I warrant such attention? What do I represent that is such a threat? Please let me take a moment to tell you about myself. My name is ASSATA SHAKUR, and I was born and raised in the United States. I am a descendant of Africans who were kidnapped and brought to the Americas as slaves. I spent my early childhood in a racist, segregated South. I later moved to the northern part of the country, where I realized that black people were equally victimized by racism and oppression. I grew up and became a political activist, participating in student struggles, the anti-war movement, and most of all, in the movement for the liberation of African Americans in the United States. I later joined the Black Panther Party, an organization that was targeted by the COINTELPRO program, a program that was set up by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to eliminate all political opposition to the U.S. government's policies, to destroy the Black liberation movement in the United States, to discredit activists, and to eliminate potential leaders. Under the COINTELPRO program, many political activists were harassed, imprisoned, murdered, or otherwise neutralized. As a result of being targeted by COINTELPRO, I, like many other young people, was faced with the threat of prison, underground, exile, or death. The FBI, with the help of local police agencies, systematically fed false accusations and fake news articles to the press, accusing me and other activists of crimes we did not commit. Although in my case the charges were eventually dropped or I was eventually acquitted, the national and local police agencies created a situation where, based on their false accusations against me, any police officer could shoot me on sight. It was not until the Freedom of Information Act was passed in the mid-'70s that we began to see the scope of the United States government's persecution of political activists.